an EU law could kill Apple's App Store monopoly and allow other companies like Microsoft and the Epic Games Store to launch their own app stores and not pay a penny of commission to Microsoft, or to Apple, that should be. Right, there's a lot to discuss. Let's get into it. So, Bloomberg has been reporting a new news story, and it's to do with how Apple is currently doing behind the scenes software work to make sure that it can allow other companies to run their own third party app stores via iOS. Now, this is to do with the Digital Markets Act. So, let me just bring up the story on screen so you can see it. Let's bring it up here. There we go. Apple to allow Apple outside app stores in an overhaul. Right, so the Digital Markets Act. Now, what this basically means is that come 2024, all the major big tech companies will have to adhere to it. And what it essentially says is that users must be allowed to install third-party apps and be able to change their default settings, and that outside developers will be able to get equal access to core features within apps and services. So there is a lot under the hood to discuss about this, but really it comes down to two things: companies being able to launch their own third-party stores, and users being able to sideload their own products. So let's have a look at this in a bit closer detail. Right. So the App Store, we all use it now. It's a big thing. It's a part of everyday life on mobile platforms. It was first revealed at the end of 2007 and launched in 2008. So, what is the App Store? Just to go into briefly what it is. It's a really good platform because it allows software developers, small software developers, to be able to reach a worldwide audience through their products. Because previously they might have had to sell their games or software through a, this is on PC, this is via the web. And what the App Store has allowed is for people anywhere in the world to be able to sell to anybody else in the world. And it's really a fantastic system because it means that you have this access to this worldwide audience, and there is not much outlay, or there is no outlay at all. You don't have to pay Apple a fee to do this. It's all free. But what you do pay is a commission. I know because I've produced the book, sold it through the Apple bookstore, and did it that way. And so that worked for me. So it's good in that it allows the publishers, the developers of any size to be able to reach this worldwide audience, to be able to have their software on Apple's servers so that people can download it. And if it's popular, that's a many downloads. So the user does, or sorry, the publisher doesn't have to pay any of these costs of they don't have to pay server costs, they don't have to worry about download problems. It's all dealt with by Apple. But there is a catch. And the catch is that publishers, developers have to pay commission, as you would expect. But this commission is, it can be around 30%. 30% is a significant chunk of your revenue, really. And there are some instances where smaller developers, they're allowed to pay less commission, maybe 15% commission, depending on if it's their if they're earning less than $1 million. And there are some other exceptions as well. But so, looking at it, you would think it's a fair trade. You get to sell your product, you get to market your products over the Apple ecosystem, and you give Apple a commission. Now, the question is, this this commission that Apple gets, there is some unhappiness about it, that it is too much, that it is 30%, and that it should be less. And so it's come to be regarded as something called an Apple tax. Excuse me. So When Apple first introduced it, it was a app store for their phone, which was, relatively popular, but still niche in comparison to all the other phones that were out there at the time, including BlackBerry. So companies, developers, publishers paying a commission, it didn't seem like such a big deal. But it's now come to be regarded as a tax. So why is this? And the problem is that back in 2008, people were predominantly using desktop computers, laptop computers. If they were doing any purchases, they were over the web. And but what has happened in this period of time is that society's changed, people have changed, and now smartphones are an integral part of everyone's lives. And because of this, the spending that people were doing online over the web tends to now be over the smartphone. And more than that, because Apple has become so popular, its iPhone system, its iOS platform, and the iPad, they become so popular. It means that pretty much for anybody who's spending online, they are doing it through their phone. So the net outcome of this is that for every penny spent online through the Apple App Store, Apple is getting a 30% commission. And so this is why it's now being called an Apple tax. And whilst not everybody in the West is spending through their phone, maybe they're doing it on a computer or a desktop computer through a web browser, there are changes in other markets. So, for example, in emerging markets such as India, which is a massive market, and the African nations, for the majority of people, they don't have a laptop or a desktop as their computer. They have one computer, and their computer is the smartphone. And because of this, if they're doing any spending through app stores or whatever, it then means that all their spending it's paying 30% commission to Apple. This is an incredible amount. So as these smartphone platforms like iOS and Google's Android become, ubiquitous essentially, this means they are each with their own app stores getting 30% of every penny sold, or every pound, every dollar, whatever it is. And so there is this unhappiness about this. So because of this, the smaller developers, smaller publishers, they're happy to do this, or there's not really much opportunity there's not really any alternative, so they just accept it. But there are some big companies that see this as a major problem. So Tim Sweeney is the CEO of Epic Games, and he runs the Epic Games Store. It's also the company behind the Fortnite game, which is massively popular. Now, he was very unhappy. He's been very unhappy that with Fortnite, which is a free game, but that Epic makes profit from the DLC or any downloads that people pay for extras. What he was unhappy about is that Apple was taking 30% commission on everything that Epic was selling. So he wanted to offer an alternative payment system, which he did do through the app at first until Apple blocked it. And then they went to court together. And essentially, whilst there's some toing and froing about it, essentially Apple overall won. And it's not just Epic that's unhappy about this 30% that's being paid. Also, the CEO of Spotify, Daniel Ek, he's called, he's unhappy because what it means is Spotify is now competing with Apple's own music alternative, which is Apple Music. And Spotify is having to charge a higher price because it has to pay 30% commission. And so this means overall is having a net effect of meaning it can't drop its prices as much to be competitive with Apple Music. And the Match Group CEO, she was also very unhappy with what Apple is doing with this. So so there is unhappiness that 30% commission is being paid to Apple every single time. Now, if we have a look at in detail at the Bloomberg report, let's just go into it. I'm just going to bring it up. Right. So I'm just going to read this out to you. The main new European law, dubbed the Digital Markets Act, takes effect in the coming months, but companies aren't required to comply with all the rules until 2024. Government officials in the US and other countries have pushed for similar laws, but haven't gotten as far. So, what it means is the Act requires technology companies to allow the installation of third party apps and let users more easily change default settings. The rule demands that messaging services work together and that outside developers get equal access to core features within apps and services. So, we'll come back to the messaging aspect another time. But if you look at that there, um, it also mentions side loading. So side loading is where a user can download or install an app onto his or her phone that has not been approved by Apple, and that's not really possible at the moment unless you take the unless you uh, effectively hack your iPhone. And Apple doesn't allow it for a very good reason, really. It wants to protect users from viruses because if you sideload an app, there's always the potential that it is a maybe a pirated app or it's been um, somebody has put spyware in it. So by running the App Store, Apple is able to make sure that people are only installing software that is clean. And so this is what Apple's trying to avoid. But with this new Digital Markets Act, it's going to mean that users will be able to install their own apps through sideloading. So the gist of the story is that Mark Gurman, the Bloomberg reporter, he's found out that Apple is actively working on the engineering, the software engineering, to ensure that it can allow third-party companies to create their own app stores. And the fact that they're spending time and resources on this means it's going to happen. It's coming because the Apple can't avoid what is EU law once it goes live effectively. So this is going to happen, and there's also the possibility of uh, companies or developers being able to use third-party payment systems because at the moment everybody's having to use Apple Pay through Apple, and everything you pay through Apple gives Apple a 30% cut. So it's an interesting time. It means there's changes coming, and what does it mean in terms of wider repercussions? Well, obviously, Apple's not going to want to give up that 30% commission in countries that it doesn't have to. So even when the act, the law comes into place, Apple is not going to drop the commission in other countries, specifically its biggest market, which is the Americas. It's not going to do that. It might do after a period of time, but for the moment, what Gurman, the Bloomberg reporter, is suggesting is that it will be only for the EU that Apple is going to do this. So that's quite interesting. So bear with me. So what's going to happen once this happens, right? What happens? Well, once what's the effect of this actually going to be? Well, there are two players that are really going to be interested in this, and one of them is Microsoft. Now, Microsoft, massive company, another big tech company, it tried to launch its own smartphone with the Windows platform, the Windows Phone platform, and it didn't succeed. It was a massive failure. Essentially, Microsoft was too late to the market. It wasn't to do with the product. It was just that the market had become set in its ways, either using Android phones or even using Apple iPhones. So Microsoft feels it's missed out. But what it can do once this takes place, what it can do is it can create its own Microsoft store. This is something it's going to be actively trying to do because it's now at the moment it's locked out of the iPhone market. It's locked out of the Android market, this big massive big tech company, and it can't reach all these consumers. It can't profit from all these consumers. So what it could do is launch its own app store. Now the question is, will users want to go to another app store when there is, when there is the main Apple app store? And I think it will be easy after a period of time. They just need to be, educated, so to speak, uh, and it shouldn't be too hard for people to change their habits. So you've got Microsoft. It will no doubt launch its own Xbox Game Store, but also Tim Sweeney, the CEO of Epic Games, he runs the Epic Game Store, which is a web store for buying PC games. And he's been so unhappy with Apple, so he could then conceivably bring the Epic Game Store to iPhone, to iOS. So why would customers choose to go to these new alternative app stores? Well, it is likely that Microsoft and the Epic Game Store will offer a lower rate of commission, will charge a lower rate of commission to its developers and publishers. So the Epic Game Store, it charges just 12% to people, to companies selling their games on the Epic Game Store, as does Microsoft with the Windows Store. So if it was to launch that, if these companies were to launch their stores, they are likely to be charging a cheaper rate of commission. And if it's a cheaper rate of commission, then this could conceivably mean a cheaper rate of cheaper prices for the public. And so it means that Fortnite, which is currently blocked on iOS, there's going to be an alternative. People will be able to possibly buy it on the Epic Game Store, be able to download it for free and then use it on that. And then Microsoft, of course, is going to be more than happy to now finally be able to access the iPhone market, the iPhone audience. So that's going to be a great thing to do. And I've got a message from Who Cares Not Me. Hello, Australia. Thank you. Thank you for your message. Nice to hear from you. And so it will be a really good option for the public. Let's just bring that message up there, because there will be choice. Now, it means also that smaller developers, they could then take their games to these larger stores. So it then means that the App Store market will open up. There will be real alternatives, real changes, a real choice. And so that can only be a good thing, really. Now, when we look at things now, to wrap up, when we look at things, Apple has been gifted this market. Of course, it created it, but it's currently, because it's such a monopoly, along with Android, it's got this massive market, and it's dominating. It's dominating, and it's got this tax, as it's called, this Apple tax on digital goods. And it's not really going to be possible to maintain this forever. Certainly, you're going to get this change in the EU. And if it's successful, it may be then that afterwards, America, which is not so fussed about anti-competitive companies, it will inevitably put pressure on the US to make changes further down the line. But I think this is definitely interesting. And if it means that you can natively buy or natively download Fortnite and other games on the App Store, that's going to please a lot of people. So it's the start of change. It's the start of movement. And sometimes for once, I think the EU is doing something good here. And hopefully it's going to be a sign of more good things to come. Thank you for watching. Like if you liked it, and I will see you next time. Cheers.